Jordan Henderson lay on the grass of the Estadio Azteca with an oxygen mask clamped to his face while his teammates screamed in a delirium of joy just yards away. He wasn't breathing the thin 7,000-foot air of Mexico City. He was breathing the artificial lifeline of a medical tank. The scoreboard read 3-2, a result that felt like a clerical error compared to the visceral violence of the preceding 2 hours. This was not a football match. It was a slow-motion car crash involving two nations, a corruptible climate, and a referee who became the most hated man in two different hemispheres simultaneously. We need to talk about what really happened in that concrete bowl, because the broadcast didn't capture the half of it. The psychological assault on the England squad did not begin with the first whistle on Sunday evening. It began 36 hours earlier in the sterile, high-end district of Santa Fe. England had chosen a hotel on the western edge of the city to avoid the chaos of the center, but the Mexican fans found them anyway. At 2 a.m. on Saturday, the serenade began. This is an entrenched Latin American tradition, but this was different. This was industrial-grade sleep deprivation. Hundreds of fans arrived with commercial loudspeakers, industrial fireworks, and air horns powered by portable compressors. The local police, usually quick to move protesters in this wealthy district, simply watched. They leaned against their cruisers and scrolled through their phones while the sky turned orange with pyrotechnics. This was the exact playbook used to dismantle Ecuador just days prior. It is a deliberate, tactical weapon designed to ensure the opposition enters the stadium with the heavy eyes and slow cognitive processing of the exhausted. Thomas Tuchel tried to play it down. He told the media that a 6 p.m. kickoff allowed for morning naps. He was lying. You could see the fatigue in the players' eyes during the warm-ups. They looked like men who had been through a vibratory torture chamber. And then they stepped out into the Azteca itself. This stadium is a monument to English trauma. It is the site of the hand of God, the place where Diego Maradona broke English hearts in 1986. The history here isn't just recorded in books, it is etched into the very concrete of the stands. The physical reality of the Azteca is its own opponent. At 7,350 feet above sea level, the air contains approximately 20% less oxygen than at sea level. For elite athletes tuned to the oxygen-rich pitches of the Premier League, this is a physiological nightmare. The ball moves faster because the air is thinner. It doesn't dip where it should. It sails. And then there were the 80,824 voices. The new Mexican rallying cry, "Si se puede," didn't just ring out, it vibrated through the floorboards of the dressing rooms. When a massive thunderstorm rolled in and delayed the kickoff by 60 minutes, the tension became unbearable. The stadium DJ played "Don't Look Back in Anger," a song that usually unites English crowds. Here, it was drowned out by a wave of whistling so loud it registered on local seismic sensors. England's strategy was simple: survive the first 20 minutes. Tuchel knew that the home side would use the altitude and the crowd to launch a blitzkrieg. Mexico obliged. Raúl Jiménez nearly tore the roof off the stadium in the 16th minute with a diving header that required every inch of Jordan Pickford's wingspan to stop. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated terror. The English players were gasping. Their lungs felt like they were filled with hot sand, but they held. They moved the ball with an agonizing, frustrating slowness that infuriated the 80,000 Mexicans in the stands. It was tactical boredom used as a shield. Then the world changed in 98 seconds. In the 36th minute, Jude Bellingham transformed from a tired young man into a force of nature. He rose above the Mexican defense to meet a Bukayo Saka cross with a header so powerful it looked like it had been shot from a cannon. Before the stadium could even process the silence, it happened again. Straight from the kickoff, England hunted the ball like wolves. Harry Kane squared it, and Bellingham bundled it home, 2-0. In less than 2 minutes, the loudest stadium on earth had been turned into a library. Mexico had gone 4 straight World Cup matches without conceding a goal. England had just destroyed that record twice before the halftime oranges were sliced. But the Azteca doesn't allow for easy endings. Just before the interval, the atmospheric pressure seemed to shift. Ezri Konsa, perhaps feeling the effects of the thin air, failed to clear a routine free kick. The ball fell to Julian Quinones, who struck it with such venom that Pickford didn't even move. 2-1. The stadium didn't just cheer, it exploded. The sound was a physical weight. As the players walked down the tunnel, the vibe was one of impending doom. They weren't winning. They were being hunted. The second half was where the match transitioned from sport into a survival horror film. England actually looked composed for the first few minutes. Nico O'Reilly, the young left-back, struck the post with a long-range effort that would have silenced the doubt. It didn't go in. Instead, the 54th minute arrived. Jarell Quansah, a player who had been battling for fitness all week, mistimed a sliding challenge on Jesus Gallardo. It was a nasty, studs-up lunge born of fatigue. The referee, Alireza Fagani, initially let it go. Then came the signal to the ear, the walk to the VAR monitor, the slow-motion replay that made every England fan's stomach turn. Fagani returned to the pitch and held the red card aloft. The mountain England had to climb suddenly doubled in height. 10 men, 40 minutes left, high altitude, a hostile crowd. But the red card was just the spark. As Quansah walked off, the benches erupted. This wasn't just shouting. This was a multi-person physical altercation. Reports from the touchline suggest punches were thrown between backroom staff. Reece James, currently sidelined with injury, was caught on camera in a screaming match with Mexican legend Guillermo Ochoa. The professional veneer of the World Cup had vanished, replaced by the raw, tribal animosity of a street fight. Somehow, England found a response. 5 minutes after the red card, Anthony Gordon exploited a moment of Mexican hesitation and was wiped out by goalkeeper Raul Rangel. It was a clear penalty. Harry Kane, who had spent the last 10 minutes being pelted with beer cups from the upper tiers, stepped up to the spot. He buried it. 3-1. That should have been the end. A 2-goal lead with 10 men is usually a death sentence for the opposition, but this wasn't a usual game. Within 9 minutes, Kane went from the hero of the nation to the cause of a near riot. While defending a corner, Kane swung his boot to clear the ball and instead caught the foot of Brian Gutierrez. It was an accident, a pure striker's challenge in his own box. Again, Fagani didn't see it live. Again, the VAR booth intervened. Again, the penalty was awarded. Raul Jimenez stepped up and scored. 3-2. The final 20 minutes were played in a state of hysterical chaos. The refereeing decisions were now being debated in real time by the entire planet. Alan Shearer was screaming into his microphone that the game was being stolen by technology. Former officials were arguing on social media about the clear and obvious threshold. This wasn't a series of isolated mistakes. It was exactly how the system was designed to work. The introduction of VAR was meant to find the truth, but in the heat of the Azteca, truth felt subjective. Half the world saw a masterclass in officiating from Alireza Fagani, a man who had the courage to make 3 massive calls against the run of play. The other half saw a man who had lost control of the emotional pulse of the game. Thomas Tuchel's post-match comments were a scorched earth policy. He questioned why a South American VAR crew was assigned to a match involving Mexico. He called the officiating not good enough for a school park. It was the sound of a man who had seen his tactical plan nearly ruined by a flickering screen in a darkened room. The final stretch of the game felt like an eternity. The fourth official held up the board. 11 minutes of stoppage time. It was a number that felt like a joke. In reality, the game stretched past 12 minutes as England players collapsed with cramp and Mexico poured forward. The ball never seemed to leave the England penalty area. John Stones nearly scored an own goal. Dan Burn was heading balls clear while literally leaning on the goalpost for support. The physical toll was visible. The England players weren't running anymore. They were staggering. Their faces were pale, their lips tinged with blue from the lack of oxygen. When the final whistle finally blew, there were no triumphant lunges into the crowd. Most of the England players simply fell where they stood. They looked like survivors of a natural disaster, and then came the final absurd tragedy of the night. Jordan Henderson, a veteran of 100 battles, tripped over an advertising hoarding during the post-match celebrations. He landed awkwardly, shattering his wrist and suffering a respiratory collapse from the sheer exertion of the previous 2 hours. The sight of him being carried off with an oxygen mask was the final image of a night that defied logic. England had won. They had secured their finest World Cup knockout victory since 1966. They had conquered the Azteca, becoming only the third team in history to win a competitive match in that stadium against Mexico. They had overcome a red card, 2 VAR penalties, a hotel siege, and a physical environment that was actively trying to kill them. But at what cost? They head to Miami for a quarter-final against Norway with a depleted squad, a suspended defender, and a midfield leader in a hospital bed. For Mexico, the Quinto Partido remains a dream. They have been knocked out of the round of 16 for the 8th consecutive time. This was their home. This was their altitude. This was their crowd. They had every institutional and environmental advantage possible, and they still couldn't break the English resolve. Javier Aguirre has stepped down, passing the torch to Rafael Marquez, but the scars of this night will take decades to heal. To lose like this at the Azteca is a wound to the national psyche. The stadium is empty now, the plastic cups and discarded flags being swept up by a skeleton crew of cleaners. The silence is heavy. It is hard to reconcile the quiet of the midnight air with the sonic violence that occurred just hours ago. We will talk about the referee for years. We will talk about Jude Bellingham's 98 seconds of perfection. We will talk about the oxygen masks and the fireworks. But mostly, we will remember the feeling of a game that refused to be governed by rules or reason. England moves on to the next round, but they leave a piece of themselves behind in the thin air of the capital. The tournament continues, the brackets fill out, and the world turns its eyes toward Miami and the inevitable clash with Erling Haaland. But no matter what happens in the final, no matter who lifts the trophy, those who were there will know. They will know that the real war was fought in a concrete bowl at 7,000 feet, where football stopped being a game and became a test of the human spirit. The grass will grow back, and the stands will be painted, but the ghost of this match will haunt the Azteca forever. Jordan Henderson is recovering in a local clinic, his wrist set in plaster and his breathing returned to normal. He will likely watch the quarterfinal from the sidelines, a victim of a celebration that went wrong in a night where nothing went right. The lights are out in Santa Fe, the fans have gone home, the sirens have finally stopped. All that remains is the cold, hard fact of the scoreline and the lingering smell of ozone from the storm. England survived the impossible. The thin air still tastes like iron. How much can one team endure? The noise eventually fades to black.